Hey, what's up, guys? This is Terence Lester from Love Beyond Walls. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia, and today you're tuned in to Uniiqe Life.
Describe a day in the life of a homeless person. What is it like? What does it feel like? Because I feel like you can't help everyone. You want to help everyone, and sometimes you're just so into what you're doing, just to be honest. You know, like you got to go here, you got to go there, you got to do this, you got to do that. So you can't stop and help. So then you start to make up stories for the person that you don't know. Like, oh, he must be on drugs, or I don't know why he ended up, he needs to go get a job, but you don't know why they're there, right? So you start to tell yourself reasons why they're there to sort of like make an excuse as to why you shouldn't stop and help. But maybe if you can describe what are some of the thoughts and the experiences that a homeless person experiences on a typical day to sort of get us to understand what it's really like.
Yeah. When I first started Love Beyond Walls, I actually started the organization with a campaign where I lived as a homeless person under a bridge, and it was probably one of the most life-changing campaigns that I've ever done. You know, I remember doing it around December, so it was a colder month, and not having any access to like blankets or change of clothes and all of the different things that we take for granted when we have those at the tip of our fingers. And so, being out there just 2 hours in 17-degree weather, you're thinking about like, how do I get a blanket? I was just fortunate enough that the community rallied together and they got me a tent and they got me a blanket. And then, it started raining and then the wind chill. And I remember it was the first night I had, was living out there, and I remember standing around this little ditch, and some of my friends, they were talking. I was like, it's cold out here, man. And I'll never forget them all saying we're gonna have to use, donated clothes that people had just brought out there to burn, to keep warm. And I remember everybody going in their tents and getting clothes that people had just brought out there and throwing them in this little ditch and starting a fire because there was no firewood. And then I remember going inside the tent and laying down, and I didn't have a cardboard, and there was jagged rocks like piercing my side, and my feet were wet and my toes felt like popsicles. And I just kept thinking to myself, I don't know how I'm gonna make it through the night. And what about using the restroom, or taking a shower? The next morning getting up, I remember my phone had died, and like I was asking them, well, how do you charge phones? And I was having to walk a couple miles just to have access to power to charge the phone. And then wondering like, well, how do we get something to eat? And my friend who is experienced homeless saying, we gotta pray for food. It's different when you are not in the context of someone else's shoes that's going through that plight, because you don't understand that this is a second by second, a moment by moment survival. It's not just like, when we ride in the car or we walk past somebody on the street, we only see them for like that small frame of time, not knowing that they have the rest of the 24 hours to deal with. And what does all that entail? Is it being put out of a restaurant for asking for water? Is it being denied public restroom? Is it, being harassed by police officers? Back in the city of Atlanta, there's these departments that would come and like sweep all the tents and all of the stuffs, the book bags and everything that people own, and throw it in the trash, and you have to start all the way back over. Is it having to stand in a long line to receive food? Is it having to like figure out how you're gonna get your identification back once you've lost that? I mean, it's so much to deal with, and that's on your mind. After a while, you start to it weighs on you. You know, you can't even think about anything else other than a second by second survival. So I would say, you know, even if you can't help anyone, I always encourage people to look somebody in their eyes, man. You never know how just acknowledging somebody or saying, hey, how are you? You know, even if you can't help in the moment, just looking somebody in their eyes and noticing them to let them know that they matter enough to be looked at, you know, to be noticed, to be acknowledged. We all know what it feels like to like be looked over.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, especially if you're a believer or you're Christian or whatever, like that's the gospel message. You know, in that while we were still yet sinners, Christ died for us. You know, God didn't wait until we were perfected or we had it all together. He noticed us and then he provided the gift for us to be reconciled unto him. That's the gospel. That's the good news. And so if Christ died for our spiritual poverty, we have an automatic, like, we have this bridge automatically kind of like embedded in our faith to walk across to have compassion and empathy towards people who have material poverty, right? We're all poor in some way, right? and when we understand that, whether yours is spiritual or you know, just materialistic poverty, then you understand that we all have something in common. And so I normally urge believers, I'm like, yo, like Paul in Corinthians talking about how Jesus became poor so that you might become rich. Rich in what? Rich in relationship with God, right? And so that should then compel you. Like that should overwhelm you to the point where you have Samaritan eyes. That when you look out into the world, you have this compassion because you have a God that was first compassionate towards you. That should push you to want to be compassionate towards anybody that you see who is broken, whether they're immaterially broken or materially broken. Like, so that's why I can't not notice or, you know, have some type of empathy or compassion towards others because I know what God has first done for me. Absolutely. You know, when you're at the bottom, like what did God do for you? And like if that's not bubbling up on the inside of you, like my question is, have you really been transformed? Has it really impacted you in a place where you want to then go and share with other people that same love beyond walls?
When you talk about that, especially for believers, like we should be living a life of service, not just an event, right? So, and sometimes we can glamorize that, right? Like we'll see you on social media. Like I saw you doing the walk and I'm like, oh my gosh, wow. Like I'm so inspired. I don't think I'll be doing it, but you know, because we're getting glimpses of things, we don't, and you know, we see other people doing good deeds and stuff like that. But I think we can gloss over what the cost of service is. What it really costs you to serve, to sacrifice, because I mean, Christ, he set the ultimate example of laying down your life. And we read about the cost, but we'll still never ever grasp the magnitude of what he did. So if you could share like what it really costs to sacrifice, and also, you know, why it's worth it. Yeah.
When we think about doing work, like you were saying earlier, there's this category of people, it's like they're doing it, but it's like in this begrudging way, like they're doing it, but their heart is not really in it. And I would say it has been fun to be able to serve other people. The sacrifice part of it, however, is gut-wrenching. Man, it drains you emotionally, physically, mentally. You know, you pour out so much and making sure that, you know, people are fed or people have somewhere to stay or people are directed to resources that can help them for mental health issues, or like, you know, people have opportunity to shower, people have opportunity to have, it's just so much, and it becomes overwhelming. And it literally then becomes taking up your cross daily for real, like remembering why you are doing this, which is ultimately to glorify God. And that within itself creates what Eugene Peterson was trying to communicate when he was living, having a long obedience in the same direction. And I think it's hard for people who they're doing something and it's not attached to something greater than themselves. Like mine is attached to being obedient to God. When I think about would God be pleased at the type of work that I'm doing, I think that He would be pleased.
Yeah.
But when it's just to please ourselves, that is short-lived. You know what I mean? Like, that's gonna run out. You're gonna want to try
you get
to
over it when it starts to hurt.
Like, yeah. Like it. You can move on to something else real easy. You could switch your calls. You could do a million things, and it's just like there are not enough people doing this type of work in this particular field. And when I read Proverbs and I read Solomon writing that to serve the poor is to honor God, I'm like, wow, we get a chance to do that. So, you persevered through. And then God sends you encouragement along the way and stories and all sorts of things to remind you that you're on the right path. Yep.
Tell us about your organization. Maybe it's something that we haven't spoken about that you would like the audience to know about your organization, how we can find you, and how we can support what you're doing.
Yeah, well, Love Beyond Walls is an advocacy organization, but we have a community component and an awareness and campaigning component. One of the projects that we have coming up that I'm really excited about is we're converting this shipping container into a museum that represents homelessness and poverty. And the reason I'm excited about it is because we'll get a chance to travel with it from place to place and be disruptive and educate people about these realities. Like there will be 3 sections in this museum where people will walk in and they'll be able to read content on the wall, but also engage with like technology and audio and video and virtual reality. And so at the end of the experience, we're hoping to challenge stereotypes, create that empathy, but also give a person an opportunity to respond by creating, basic next steps for them, whether they're serving with an organization or something that they can do on their own to be able to release people out into like making a real difference in the world. Really excited about it because, is there a museum that represents poverty or homelessness in New York? When you think about that, even across the country, there are no museums that kind of represent this subject. You can go to a museum for slavery or mass incarceration or any of the like issues that have taken people's lives, right? And I just believe that poverty is something that is taking and robbing people of life. And we need to create a space that is sacred, that educates, that enlightens, but also brings attention to people who are overlooked and forgotten. So, people can follow us at Love Beyond Walls. That's Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And they always can visit our site, lovebeyondwalls.org.